Hola, profesora. Creo que se quedó congelada su... Ok. Okay. So maybe just a couple of minutes. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to wait just a couple more minutes until everyone have a chance to enter into the meeting, and then we will start the event. Professor Anamaria, you are muted. Okay, so now that we have had a chance to let everyone enter into the event, we are going to begin. Professor Anamaria.
Thank you very much, Diego. Good morning, everyone. We are very happy to welcome you from the School of Law or the Faculty of Law of the University of Chile. Today, we have the pleasure to have with us very special guests from Peking University and the School of Transnational Law. And before we started, from our International Law Affair Unit, we are very happy as a team to have both guests that are going to be introduced by Diego Caldera. He is assistant and lawyer, and he's working for the International Law Unit as part of our team, and he will introduce our guest, as I said. So thank you very much and enjoy today with us.
Thank you so much for your introduction and kind words, Professor Anamaria. First and foremost, we want to extend a warm welcome to the audience today and thank Mr. Cole and Mr. Víctor for making the time to talk to us and our students. Just recently, we attended the Global Law Fair together with 16 other universities from 14 different countries. So this is yet another milestone on our shared history of collaboration. Even though we would have loved to receive you in person, but hopefully maybe in the future we will be able to. Today we have the privilege to host this virtual event called A Model for the Future, Shenzhen and the School of Transnational Law, and to help connect qualified professionals and interested students to the prestigious School of Transnational Law of the Peking University. Mr. Agar is the director of the Graduate and International Programs of the Peking University's School of Transnational Law. He graduated first in his class from the American University in Cairo and earned his JD with honors from the University of Wisconsin Law School, where he competed on and coached teams in this international commercial arbitration moot. He has also served as a foreign language and area studies fellow, worked with the Innocence Project, and worked as a legal service attorney. Before joining the School of Transnational Law, he practiced international dispute resolution and commercial law at one of Egypt's top law firms and taught in the American University in Cairo. On the other hand, Mr. Víctor Contreras is an alumni from the University of Chile's Law School. He obtained his Bachelor of Law degree in 2017. He now holds the Master of Law from Peking University School of Transnational Law and is a senior associate at GS&Co Attorneys and Counselors, focusing mainly on China and Chile transactions. Please, we give you a warm welcome, and the floor is yours, Mr. Cole.
Thank you so much, Diego, and thank you, Professor Anamaria. I just wanted to start by kind of really doubling down on that thanks and pointing out something that I think is important. So I first met Professor Anamaria and some of her team and students about 2 years ago now. And of course, at the time, we would have never thought that this pandemic that we're now living through would have come to pass. And yet, despite the pandemic, as Professor Anamaria has said, we have continued to stay in contact. This is now actually our third event that we've done with the University of Chile, going back 2 years now. And I think it's an important reminder that the world can throw all kinds of unforeseen force majeure circumstances at us. But as lawyers, as professionals, we struggle through, and we can still keep those contacts and build those relationships. And I think that that's something just really special to think about and remind ourselves during a time that I know is really frustrating and stressful for a lot of us in the world. So that said, what I'm going to be talking about today is the School of Transnational Law where I work. But actually, before going into that, or really as a foundation to talking about the School of Transnational Law, I'm going to start by telling you about a city and in fact, a certain place on Earth today. And the reason that's where I'm starting is for a couple reasons. One, it's something quite interesting and important to kind of understanding modern China today. So I think it's worth learning a little bit about. And at the same time, the history and the growth and the development of this city and this spot within China is largely why our school exists and explains a lot about who we are and what we are trying to do as an educational institution in the world today. So, without further ado, here's the city I'm talking about. Is anyone familiar? Well, I won't ask it that way because it's hard for people to respond. But what I'll say is, so this is Shenzhen, China in 1979. And hold that image in your mind for a second while I flip to the next slide, because here is Shenzhen, China today. And if I go back and forth between those, you will notice that just about the only thing that has remained the same over my lifetime for this city is those mountains in the background, right? Everything else has changed. And I'm going to try an experiment. This is, hopefully this will be something a little bit fun that if it works, we'll try at a couple points throughout here. I'm going to throw up a poll. So I hope this works. In just a second, you should see, oh, hold on a second. I'm getting a message that it didn't go up. All right, I'm going to try one more time. And if it doesn't work, we're going to skip it. And that is just fine. All right, no worries. Well, what I was gonna ask all of you and kind of see who maybe knew some history was if anyone knew what happened in 1980, what important event happened in 1980 in China. And the reason for that is because 1980 is the year after this photo was taken. And the event is what kind of set Shenzhen and this area on the path of development that it is currently on. And that event, which you won't see in the polling question, is that 1980 is the year that China made Shenzhen its first special economic zone, which is, should be interesting to us as lawyers, right? I mean, it's this area, this city to be got this special legal status. But it was also a very important moment globally because this was the point where modern China started opening up to the rest of the world. And what we've seen from that opening up and what we've seen happen in a city like Shenzhen is that today, what had been essentially a fishing agricultural village now looks like this.
Cool. It seems like
Yes.
we are getting the poll just about now.
Yes, but the poll now it's in progress, I think.
Yes. So people are voting right now on the important question you asked about what important event happened in China in 1980.
Well, I think I just gave away the answer already, but is it, so I don't actually know how you guys are seeing it on your side. Are you still seeing a poll question up on your screen? Or has
Yes.
it gone away?
No, it is there.
Now it should be going away. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Cole.
No, that's quite all right. This is all part of the fun of learning new technology. Is the poll question still showing on people's screens? All right, the results just popped up for me, which I'm glad to see people were paying attention because most people got the right answer after I gave it to them. Okay, let me try stop sharing results and hopefully that will mean that I would assume that would mean that it would move out of people's view. Can you tell, is it still up displaying the poll for people? I clicked out of the question, but I don't actually know if that.
Now I think it's gone. Well, I will leave Diego that he will answer for you because he's more expert than me, in fact, so I'm sorry.
Sure, that's quite all right. Diego, can you see, is the poll still showing? And if it is, do you mind shutting out of the question?
Yes, no worries.
Okay.
It is not showing.
Perfect.
So I think we can continue. Thank you.
Thank you to the participant who sent me a message answering my question. That's greatly appreciated. Okay, so to jump back in here. So to kind of put this spot on the map, the broader area that we're talking about is it's China's Pearl River Delta. It's an area in southern China that is now often referred to as the Great Bay Area, or the Greater Bay Area. The most famous city in this area is Hong Kong. But the city that in many ways has become the heart of a lot of the new development of this area is Shenzhen. And it's an area that's particularly interesting today, both because of this rapid development that it has seen. By some estimates, this spot, the Greater Bay Area, in the next couple of years, the next few years, will become a continuous city of something in the realm of 100 million people. So the largest mega city in the history of our planet. But it's also important in that it's an area which is having to experiment with a lot of different challenges of this sort of development, and a lot of the different challenges that the world is experiencing today. So things like a lot of trade between different legal systems, kind of interactions of cross-border disputes. And we'll get into that a bit more later, but just sort of keep that idea in mind. And so as part of that, what we've seen happen in Shenzhen today is that in this relatively short amount of time, right, in basically our lifetimes, it has become this dominant force in sort of modern China and more in the modern world. So we see that in a couple different ways. At my own risk, I'm going to attempt to put up another polling question. We'll see if this is the last time I try. So I'm going to go to my second question here, which is, hopefully this should be popping up on your screen in just a second. And my question is, do you know where the most valuable company in Asia is located today? I'm seeing results coming in, and I'll post it when we get to about 90%. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and post it. So yeah, I mean, I think as most of you maybe correctly guessed, if not that you knew the answer, you guessed the direction that this talk is going. The most valuable company in Asia today is based in Shenzhen, China, right? A city that was largely unknown a generation ago. So that company is Tencent. You could think of it as the Google of China or the Facebook of China. Frankly, it's almost like both of those put together. Today, it's the largest social media company in the world. It's the largest investment corporation in the world. It's the largest video game company in the world. And it's one example of the types of business industry that this area of Shenzhen has been attracting. And in particular, the specialty of this area, of this city, has been intellectual property and as a result, tech companies. So as an example of that, if you can see this table over on the side here, what this is showing is new intellectual property coming out of different key countries. And, you know, I certainly grew up in an era where we largely saw China as being a country that copied the ideas of other countries. And I think for many people, it still has this reputation. The reality today is that China is actually one of the countries that the most new technological development is coming from. In this graph, you see China just about to pass Japan. This is actually about 4 years old now in terms of the data that it's showing. China has now passed Japan and is basically neck and neck with the United States, and probably in the next couple of years will pass the United States in terms of new intellectual property development. So things like patents and copyrights. And what's interesting, if you look at the bar over on the side here, you will see that, in fact, almost half of all those new patents being filed, all that new intellectual property being developed in China is coming out of just one city, and that city is Shenzhen. So in addition to Tencent, we have perhaps the much more well-known company around the world today, Huawei. We have BYD is a big electric automotive company. Actually, just an interesting fact about our city there. So Shenzhen was the first city in the world to have an all-electric bus fleet, and that is largely built by BYD. Also, almost all of our taxis are electric, and those are also all built by BYD. In the area of genetics, we have BGI, which is a leading genomics center. And maybe one of the companies that I like the best of all the Shenzhen companies, DGI. So I think what's interesting about DGI specifically is there's a lot of companies out there coming out of China that still get largely compared to their Western counterpart. So when I told you about Tencent a moment ago, the way I described it was Tencent is like the Google or Facebook of China. What's interesting about DGI is it's a company that has completely established its own reputation today, right? It is not a company that is compared to another company in Japan or Germany, because the reality is DGI is kind of, regardless of which country it was based in, is the leading company today in drone technology. So if you've been to a wedding or an event recently and it was being videotaped, most likely it was being videotaped by a DJI drone. And in fact, it is other companies around the world that are copying them. So I think it's an interesting example of this new wave of Chinese companies that are not just, almost as good as the foreign companies, but they are actually setting the new benchmark for that type of technology. It's not just the world of technology, though. We also have, Shenzhen has also been establishing itself as kind of a model and a hub for development in areas like business and trade. So one of the most interesting examples of that, I think, is the Qianhai Business Center. Let's try another poll. Let's see. So we'll see if this works. The question, which should come up for you in just a second, is what are the top 2 financial centers in the world? So a financial center being something like when we talk about Wall Street in New York, that's a financial hub or a financial center. All right, I'll give a couple more seconds and then I'm going to end the poll because we have an interesting, more split result coming in this time. So I'm going to share the results. And this time my question was maybe not meant to trick you, but certainly not meant to tie directly into what you were expecting me to say. So in fact, the 2 leading financial centers, which this has been the case through much of history, and it is still the case today, are New York and London. What is interesting is that I'm going to bring the poll down. Hopefully it's not still up. So what's interesting today is that actually in the top 4 financial centers in the world, 4 of them are in China. And this area that I was just telling you about, the Qianhai Business Center. So right now, Shenzhen, I think, is the 9th largest financial center in the world. But once this kind of Wall Street of China is completed, it's projected that it will become the 3rd largest financial center on the planet after New York and London. Now, what's particularly interesting, though, about this Qianhai Business Center is that it actually spans Hong Kong and Shenzhen. And what's interesting about that is I do have a polling question on this, but I think given the time, I'm just going to give you the answer and keep on going. So what's interesting about this dynamic between Hong Kong and Shenzhen is that Hong Kong is actually an old historic common law jurisdiction, whereas Shenzhen, based in mainland China, just alongside Hong Kong, is actually a civil law jurisdiction. And so what you have here is a single financial district that actually spans both a kind of a semi-national border, but also spans 2 different legal systems. And that's going to have some interesting implications that I'll get back to in just a second. Another area that this Greater Bay Area where Shenzhen is based has really established itself is in trade and production. So, for example, within China's Belt and Road Initiative, this has become one of the biggest hubs for international trade, and it's currently the largest import-export hub in China, with Shenzhen having the highest foreign export volume of any city. Shenzhen has also become really the tech manufacturing hub for the entire world. And so one interesting result of a lot of this development, this new tech being developed, the fact that you have a lot of cross-border trade and kind of complicated business between Shenzhen and Hong Kong, is that it has forced a lot of legal innovation and legal experimentation in this area of China's Greater Bay Area. So one interesting example of that is some of these hybrid courts that Shenzhen has been experimenting with. So what I mean by this is these are specialized courts that have been set up in this Qianhai Business Center, right? This business center that spans Hong Kong and Shenzhen. And one of the things that they are trying is doing kind of hybrid courts. So one example of that is a Shenzhen-based civil law court, but actually experimenting with using a Hong Kong jury, which, I mean, it's interesting that it's happening, but it's also pretty crazy, right? I mean, if you told France that because France does a lot of business with the US, France should use jurors from the United States, right? A jury panel from the United States, a French lawyer or a French judge would think you were crazy. I mean, they would kick you out of court. But this is actually happening in Shenzhen as one experiment for how to resolve some of these complicated disputes and to sort of build more trust in the legal system between inside powers and outside powers and investors. Another interesting example is specialized courts. So of course, we talked about how Shenzhen and the Greater Bay Area have become very important in the world of intellectual property. But the fact that China still often has this reputation of being a country that is quite bad when it comes to intellectual property rights. So one thing that China has experimented with is specialized IP courts, intellectual property courts, with one of the most significant of these being based in Shenzhen. And that is because on the one hand, actually today, it is often Chinese parties, Chinese companies that are defending their intellectual property and wanting to make sure that they have an effective way to do that. And at the same time, to show international companies and investors that this is something that Shenzhen is giving their attention to. There have been some other interesting kind of legal experimentation. So a final example of that is, second to final example of that is Benchmark Chambers International. So this is the first legal think tank developed in China, set up in Shenzhen. And it's a think tank that is looking at different international laws from around the world, analyzing them, making recommendations about maybe what things from these different laws or regulations could be effective in China, and also doing things like analyzing and advising on cross-border disputes, cross-border commerce, and these sorts of complex issues. The final sort of maybe experimentation, legal experimentation that is going on in Shenzhen is something that I won't go into detail. One, because it's still quite early, and two, because you could talk for hours about it. But it's this new Shenzhen Model City initiative that China just launched recently, kind of right before the pandemic. And you know, it covers a lot of different things, but part of it, maybe one of the most interesting, is sort of a declaration that in making Shenzhen a model city for China, and beyond that, even a model city for the world, that one new thing that will start to be experimented with in Shenzhen will be perhaps participatory government. So the ability of some maybe small elements of democratic rule and kind of further developments of rule of law, that Shenzhen will be kind of the incubator for experimenting with some of these ideas. And then maybe depending on which of those are successful, they could expand out to other cities and other parts of China. So all of this is quite interesting. And you can certainly ask some more questions about it if you would like. But what it leads to is our School of Transnational Law. So the School of Transnational Law, which was started in Shenzhen about a decade ago, is a school that is really trying to kind of capture this moment, right? This moment of intense development, you know, kind of tech development, fintech, cross-border trade, these types of practical issues that more and more lawyers have to deal with, and to create a school that is training those lawyers. So the school was started by Peking University. If you're not familiar with Peking University already, it's often referred to as like the Harvard of China. It's the oldest university in China, and although it's not as well known in the West, it is actually one of the most exclusive and prestigious universities in the world today. So what was interesting is you have this very old historic university, Peking University, partnering with this city, right, Shenzhen, and creating a new university campus there with our School of Transnational Law. So the kind of the premise of the school, the way our curriculum is built, is that we are actually offering kind of coursework that spans Chinese law, American law, you know, civil law, Western law, and also including within that a very high degree of practical skills, right? The actual types of skills that more and more lawyers actually need today. And of course, this is a trend that we're seeing generally in more and more law schools, but it's something that, you know, I'd have to admit sort of, you know, China is one of these countries that historically has had a very kind of old-fashioned legal education system. So it was particularly a new innovation within Chinese legal education. So, you know, that means things like, you know, not just combining the different areas of law that we teach, but also, you know, a high focus on things like moot court, you know, internships, a lot of practical skills building within that curriculum. And we've seen the success of this model pretty quickly. The school has brought in international faculty and students from every continent on Earth. Our graduates at this point have had something like a 99% placement rate at different companies and organizations, law firms, both international and Chinese. And it's really an exciting project that I'm happy to have been a part of, and that I'd be happy to answer any of your questions about once we get to that stage. So I'm done with sort of the bulk of what I wanted to talk with you about, although I think we can go into some more of this in the questions. And I didn't talk too much about the school itself, because as you know from the introductions, we are privileged to actually have someone here today that is both an alumni of the School of Transnational Law and an alumni of University of Chile. But just before I turn over the virtual microphone to Victor, I just wanted to give a reminder that if anyone does have questions, you can type them into the chat box in Zoom, and feel free to put questions in English or Spanish. Either one is fine. And I think with that, I will turn it over to Victor.
Thank you very much, Cole. That was a great presentation about that great city with such an incredible story. Even though, like, I'm not sure if we can talk much about the story of Shenzhen, because it's basically 40 years old or even less. So good morning, everyone. As Cole said, I'm a lawyer from our dear Universidad de Chile Law School. And after I graduate, I went for my LLM to PKU, to STL, the School of Transnational Law. And to be honest, it was my first experience with China, even though because of another career that I have quite a lot of international experience, I would say. I travel a lot normally because of work, basically. But this was my first experience with China. And STL turned out to be quite a surprise. I was actually not sure what I was, what to expect out from STL, but it's a great school. It has some of the best teachers, best professors on their respective fields in the world, very different backgrounds, and from all over the world. I thought I would encounter just Chinese teachers, but it's actually, I would say there are an actual minority, maybe. I don't know, Cole, you can correct me there. But teachers from the States, like Cole, from Europe, from everywhere, literally. And all of them coming from the best law firms, best companies, etc. They're just as excellent as it gets. But I wanted to raise another point here. I think even though STL, it's a great school and you can learn a lot of things related with law there, you also can learn law in many different places in the world. There's many good universities out there, not just in China, right? Here in Chile or in Europe or in the States. But so I think what I value, what I appreciate the most from having been there, it's no law. It's not the law, actually. I'm sorry if I disappoint you there, Cole. And let me start by telling you a little story. The first time, okay, so it was like a couple of days before starting classes at STL. I was traveling from Chile, 13 plus hours traveling, but I got to Hong Kong. Hong Kong is very close to Shenzhen, right? You can be there, you can get from Hong Kong airport to Shenzhen in half an hour, maybe now, an hour tops. But it was my first time there, so it took me something like 4 hours. The moment I got there, it was like stepping on Mars. It was a completely different world that the one I know here or than Europe or the States or whatever. It was completely different. It was crazy. My mind was blown immediately. And then after quite a struggle, I get to my hotel. I also had to struggle to check into the hotel with a nice lady that, of course, didn't speak a word of English. And then I finally get to head to my room. I'm waiting at the elevator, and the elevator doors open, and this guy, I think he sounded like he comes from the States. He got the accent, and he just pushes everyone out from the elevator and starts saying like, I'm getting out of here. I'm tired of China. And you know the dynamics. He used some different words, but that was what he meant, right? So imagine me just coming there and seeing that as my first impression of a foreigner in China, right? My presentation here comes with a warning. China is not for everybody. And that's something that I not just learned there at STL, but I see in everyday work. I work very closely related with China and Chile deals. And I see this every day at work. So China is so different from probably most things and most parts of the world that we know or that are familiar to us, that China is just for the brave. There's this concept that it might be the most important thing that I learned there, which is called the cultural glasses. Glasses like the ones you used to see through, right? So the concept goes like this. Imagine you use glasses. You see the world through your glasses, right? And depending on the type of glasses, that's how you see the world. In culture, it's the same. You see the world through your cultural glasses, and those glasses are determined by a lot of factors, but basically your story. Where were you born? Where did you study? Who are your friends? So on, right? You get it. And let me put another example here. Me and my friends there from faculty, my foreigner friends, we were kind of shocked the first time that we discovered a restaurant close to campus that actually was selling dog. And we were literally super shocked. But then if you think about it, okay, for us, dogs are pets, right? And it wouldn't cross my mind the idea of actually eating my pet, right? But in India, for instance, you all might know, cows are sacred, right? So for somebody in India, they wouldn't even think of eating a cow, but we do every day, right? And we here in Chile and Argentina, for instance, we are the kings of barbecue. So if we think that Chinese are different from us, some would say strange because they eat dog. Well, let me tell you that there's one person right now in India saying to another, like, did you know that Chileans eat cows? Like, dude, they're crazy, right? So that's what I mean with cultural glasses. And this might sound, this concept also relates with another one, which is called empathy. Empathy literally means to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, right? And this concept of empathy might sound like a cheap psychology book that you bought on the airport or something like that, or like a hippie concept like rainbows and unicorns, but it's not. Empathy is key for business, for politics, etc. Even for combat. If you're in war with somebody and you are capable of putting yourself in your opponent's shoes, then you have a strategic advantage that it would certainly give you the edge against your opponent, and in the end it would make you victorious. Same in business, right? If you are capable of seeing the world through your competitor's eyes, then you're already there. You're most certainly going to be victorious in that competition. And since as I said, I see this in daily work. Lately, actually, I have spoken a lot with Chileans exporting wine and cherries to China, which are two of the most successful exports that we make here for China, at least. And some of them have managed to establish very stable, very useful, fruitful relations with their Chinese counterparts. And you know, the moment you get on the phone with them, you know immediately who they are, because they, first of all, they know the name of the cities, and you realize they just get their culture. They know how to do business with them, etc. And then you have the ones that, and it surprised me that I encountered many of these kind of Chilean businessmen there. Then some of them, they just say like, China, no, please don't say anything about China to me, because like we're tired of it. We're just not doing more business with them. And you also realize that whenever they say, and sorry, Cole, I'm going to turn to Spanish here, but sí, tenemos un chinito allá. So they say chinito, which would be the diminution, if that's even a word, of a Chinese person. And that's a term that I think it's so disrespectful, but still people that want them use that term. So whenever I get on the phone with them, I immediately know that they have no idea what they're talking about, and they have no idea about how China works. And let me explain a little bit why this is important, why it's useful to know how China works. I'm going to show you a picture. Okay, so if you all can see this, this is, let's call it a statistic called the economic center of gravity of the world. So basically what you do here is you sum up the GDPs of all countries, and you mark where the average of that area is the highest, right, in the world. So we see here that in the year 1000, the average GDP of all this area was greater than anywhere else, right? And then this point was moving towards, this is west, with time, right? We see a huge leap here, and it's gravitating towards the States and Europe, of course, because they have been the most influential economic powers for centuries, right? But let's notice that it started here, and it gravitated very closely towards China, because before, in the times of the Chinese Empire, China was a great economic power, right? Of course, not as connected as today, but and then let's keep to here, 1950. We notice that there's a shift on direction, right? And then look at this huge leap here. This is all China growth over the years. Since ever since China opened its economy in 1980, approximately, as Cole said, and when they started all of this special economic zone thing, the economic gravity center just, it's flying back towards China. So I'll stop sharing. So that's a graphic explanation of why we should care about China, why we should know how to do business with them, and why this whole webinar is so important. As Cole mentioned before also, most of us are used to the concept of China being like the makers of the world. You just, I don't know, I'm sure the majority of the things that we buy every day are actually built in China, right? But they also have this stereotype of Chinese things being both cheap, but they don't stand out for quality, right? So the picture that all of us have on our minds about China is you just buy Chinese things because they export really cheap. Well, that's actually not true anymore. It was at some point, but since, I don't know, 10 years ago maybe, the focus has shifted greatly towards the Chinese internal market. So now people that trade with China, they're not buying Chinese cheap things. Now China is buying Chilean things, American things, European things, etc. That's why that's basically why Chile can afford to live as a country, right? Chile's budget is mainly copper bought by China, and also some other things like agriculture, wine, cherries, etc. So that's why it's so important for us to be able to understand China and to be able to take off our cultural glasses and get to see what's really going on, right? We should just get rid of our stereotypes and our prejudge and open ourselves to just a different way to see the world that it's as valid as ours, right? So if going back to this absurd meat example, I'm sorry, but it's very graphic, right? If they eat dog, that's their way to do things. If we eat cows, that's our way to do things, and it's equally valid, right? If you get that, you're not just going to be fit for traveling, but you're also going to be fit for business, and you're going to be fit for politics, and et cetera, right? Like imagine a politician that's actually capable of putting himself on both his political adversary shoes and, I don't know, like the everyday citizen shoes, right? That would be great. So that's what we should aim for, and that's the value, the added value that STL has for me. So summing up, you can study law in many great universities and many great countries and cities, but the particular context of STL being so first multicultural because you share with your Chinese classmates and Chinese teachers, but also with people from everywhere else. I had classmates from Pakistan, from the United States, from Germany, from Argentina. You get it, right? So that's it. That's just a strategic advantage that helps you both for business and for life. So yeah, now if you have questions, please, for Cole or Diego, I hand it over to you, or Professor.
Thank you very much, Victor. I was listening to you and I find very attractive what you have already told us about your own experience and about the fact that I would say, summing up, there is a word that could define the relationship between China and Chile in my own experience also. That is hospitality. Hospitality. And I think this is something in the world we should learn and expand it more. Yes. So I now would like to give back the floor to Diego, that has already been gathering many questions that has been raised within the session. And I think both of you, of course, Cole, it was wonderful. We really learned a lot, and now we all would like to go there and, you know, experience a time for a lecture or for many other things with the school. So, okay, thank you very much. And please, Diego, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Anamaria. I completely agree. I think maybe next time we meet, it's going to be in Shenzhen. But I wanted to thank you both for your really excellent presentations, and to give you some questions that I have been receiving from students. So one student asked us if the studies in the School of Transnational Law are 100% in English, or do you require to have knowledge in Mandarin Chinese? What would you say?
Or I'm happy to answer that. So you can complete our program 100% in English. You do not need any Mandarin Chinese for the program. If you want to learn Chinese, that's definitely an opportunity that you can do during the program. So certainly if that's one of the things you're interested in, you have that opportunity, but it's not required for the program.
Thank you. Also, for Victor, a student asked us, is there a market for lawyers from Latin America there?
That's a great question, actually. And I'm gonna answer it in both ways. A couple of days ago, I read an article by a Chilean woman that works very related to China, arguing that there's no market in Chile for people with experience in China. And yes, I think that's true, but it's opening up even more because people are starting to realize that if you want to deal, I don't know, in a law firm, for instance, with China, you don't need just a great lawyer. You need a great lawyer that knows China, right? Actually, this has been the case with some, I'm not going to give any name, but some of the biggest law firms in Chile that have offices in China. They normally send to their offices in China people that the only thing that know about China is nothing. Basically, they have no previous experience. But I think that's starting, and I hope that that's changing right now. And vice versa, market for Latin lawyers in China, there is, I think there is, because also the Chinese market also realize and acknowledge the fact that as we need to understand them to make business, they need to understand us, right? So there are many interesting both companies and law firms looking for international qualified lawyers. But I should notice though that it's, as a foreign lawyer, you're not able to work in the same terms as a Chinese lawyer, right? As a Chinese lawyer wouldn't be able to work in the same terms as here in Chile, right? Because law is a profession that it's heavily regulated everywhere. But yes, there's a market for that.
Thank you, Victor. We also get a question that is directed to both of you. So it's a two-part question. First is if Shenzhen, is it an expensive city to live or study in? That's the first part. And the other part is how hard is the language barrier? Or can you communicate with people knowing maybe English or basic Chinese, or how does it work?
Do you want to go ahead, Cole?
Sure, maybe I can go first and you can go second. So in terms of cost of living, the first thing I would say is like there was this myth from a generation ago of China being a place that you went to and you would live like a king, right? That our money was so strong there as Westerners that everything costs just mere pennies, right? That is definitely not the reality in China today. But certainly if you compare living even in one of the top tier cities in China to New York or London, frankly, any of Western Europe or North America, it's a cheaper place. And certainly living on our campus is much cheaper than, you know, doing a program elsewhere. You can get a dorm room for something, I don't know in Chilean currency, but you know, maybe $1,000 for the entire year, which like that's what I paid in law school for 1 month. So it's not as cheap as it was, but it's still a pretty reasonably priced place to live. Like you can get a meal on our campus for about $1 or $2 if you eat in the cafeteria. But if you want, you can also go to an, you know, fancy sushi restaurant at the top of a massive sky tower and pay $300 for a meal. So, you know, I mean, it's a big city. You can find almost anything, but it's still a fairly reasonably priced city to live in.
Yeah, the best, I think the best option for sure, if you're planning on studying at STL, is to live on campus. They have these 5 huge buildings full of small apartments, more rooms. It's like an hotel. It's not an hotel, of course, but that's kind of how it works. And those are the rooms, actually. They're very comfortable, private rooms or shared rooms, you can choose. And they're quite affordable. I think it's something about 800,000 pesos a year. I'm not sure, at least that was about it when I was there. Of course, that has changed, I guess. And yeah, if you have dinner or lunch at campus, that's also very cheap and very nice food, actually, good quality. But okay, so there you have the prices. 12,000 RMB are about 1 million pesos. Between the conversion between RMB and pesos is quite similar. So just add a few zeros there. And in general, in Shenzhen, it's fairly similar to Chile, I would say, in terms of prices. It's not as cheap as you would imagine, as Cole said. But there's also, there's a lot of foreigners in Shenzhen. And most of those foreigners, it's a very westernized city within China. So if you want to go to the foreigner neighborhood and get dinner at a fancy sushi place, it's going to be super expensive. I can assure you that. So it depends on you. And about, they also ask about language, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to get to that second, but if you want to start on language, go ahead.
I got there with zero knowledge of Chinese, literally zero. I had a great teacher there at STL. I really appreciate her, that she saved my life many times. And but for daily things, you yeah, of course, it's an advantage to know the language for ordering food or etc., asking directions, stuff like that. But you can get around with no English, but with a good translate app on your phone. That's how I survived the first, I don't know, 4 months, basically. And as I said, since there's many foreigners in Shenzhen, the Chinese people of Shenzhen, they're used to people like us, like walking randomly on the street, very lost. So they are helpful and welcoming, and they will help you if you have the translator, of course.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Cole, would you like to add something, or should we
yeah, if there's more questions, move on. Victor basically summed it up pretty well.
Perfect. Okay. Well, for time's sake, seeing as we are right about on our time mark, we just have time for this one last question, and it's for you, Cole. A student asked if there are opportunities for scholarships or financing options, something like this, for a student that, or a professional that wants to study at the School of Transnational Law.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's often one of the most, and just realistically important questions, of course, to many applicants. So the first thing I will say is actually a very high percentage of our students do get scholarships to study in the program. And there's a couple different types. So the easiest type of scholarship to get, which you know, any of you would be eligible for, are scholarships from the law school itself. So these could be merit or need-based funding. And it basically covers a portion of your tuition. There's another type of scholarship which has become maybe better and better known as more international students go to study in China. And those are Chinese government scholarships. As far as I know, they don't seem to be, well, it's a complicated process in some ways. And so I won't necessarily go into excruciating detail here. What I will say is I know students from Chile are eligible for these scholarships because actually a friend and colleague of Víctor studied at Peking University last year on one of them, not at our LLM, but at our main campus. But we're all part of the same university. So I know that if she was able to receive it to go to our main campus, you could equally receive that scholarship for our program. And that can also cover your housing costs. It pays you a living stipend. I'm sure Victor had some friends in the program who are on these scholarships. I don't know, were you? Okay, great. So you know all about them.
I received, I'm sorry, Cole. I received this scholarship. You have to apply at the Chinese embassy here in Santiago, and it covers a fraction of the tuition fee, plus it also covers housing and the cost of living. They give you monthly a monthly amount to eat or to do free disposal, right? And it's, of course, you're not gonna get rich because of it, but it's enough to cover all expenses.
Yeah. And if any of you do have more detailed questions about things like scholarships, please feel free to email me. If it's a question about the Chinese government scholarship, I will probably connect you with Victor, because the person who knows most about how to apply for it from any country is someone who's already gotten it from that country, because the exact process is a little bit different in every jurisdiction. So you have to be careful what you read about online.
Okay, thank you very much, Cole. Well, So I just wanted to thank you both once again for taking the time to make this really wonderful presentation. I think everyone today is coming out more informed that the way they came in. Gave you as well the contact points in case you would like to ask more detailed questions. And for the final words before we close this webinar, I leave you with Professor Anamaria.
Thank you, Diego, very much. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Cole. It is a pleasure, and I didn't realize that we are already for 2 years working. It has been very motivating. We really admire your enthusiasm and the way you share with the students. And I think it's there where our cooperation always will be very worth it to continue. That is that we are benefiting our students. We are providing new ways to improve their lives through education. And I think this is maybe one of the best ways for the students to show a good path and to improve their skills professionally and also in their human aspects. So I think today I would consider a success in the sense that we planned, you know, after the other big event that we have in November. So I think in this short time, we also could see that there were already a lot of students interested, and we of course will facilitate your contact if more people that couldn't come today will be able to maybe later to be interested in this program, and that we have this also recorded, and that of course the same, I would say, in Chile the doors are open in our Faculty of Law. University of Chile will always be a place where our doors will keep open to welcome friends for all over the world, and in this case from China, from Shenzhen. So thank you very much to all of you, and see you in another occasion.
Thank you very much, Professor Anamaria, and thank you to all of our participants today. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Victor. Bye.